Hello everyone, this is Adama. Thanks for stopping by. If you're on this video, I would highly recommend watching the animation that I'm explaining. Otherwise, this won't make any sense. But if you want to go in the wrong order, sure, you can do that too. Just watch both, I guess. So I actually started this project back in 2017, late 2017. I think it was November specifically. And that was when Bitcoin started to go to the crazy new all-time highs. And I was interested in Bitcoin for quite some time before that. I think I started looking into it in 2013. Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I really liked the idea of digital scarcity and like a public ledger, and I understood surface level ideas of it. So in 2013, I got my initial introduction to it, and then for the next 4 to 5 years, I didn't really think about it at all. The price movement was pretty dead, and it seemed like maybe it was a failed experiment, honestly. Like there were so many ups and downs of it that it was pretty hard to tell what was going to happen. Anyway, so I was excited. I started making some GIFs to contribute to the meme culture. There's some famous ones like the roller coaster, and Neo, and the Bitcoin wizard, and all memes are great for conveying ideas. So I started building up these little characters, and then I started building up a landscape and background art, and then I just started to build this scene, and I'm like, oh well, I'll just make a whole music video. And then I took one of the tracks I made in 2015, I think. It was an old track at that point, but I always pictured like a train. I always pictured like people cheering, and then I realized that it was a perfect vehicle for this Bitcoin music video, and I just started to make the video. So nothing was actually planned. I just kept adding and adding to it, and maybe like I could have probably made the production cycle much quicker, but I didn't know where I was going with this, so I just kind of kept snapping together pieces, and yeah, it turned out, I think, pretty good. So right off the bat, there's a quick flash of this is not financial advice, which if anyone's slightly interested in Bitcoin, they'll look up some videos on YouTube or something like that, and that's usually the way people start it, and it kind of became a meme so people don't get sued. But then it kind of became self-aware, and people started saying it all the time. It was pretty funny, so I thought I'd start my video with that as well, because this is not financial advice. This is just an experiment of sorts. So I wanted the first scene to start off with a bang, so to speak, and it's a pretty provocative intro. A bank getting hit with a meteor, and then coins going everywhere. So there's a few concepts already in that in itself. The meteor was supposed to be the Genesis block, and if you look closely, you can see a QR code, and that QR code is the address of the Genesis block, which is the first block mined on Bitcoin. The date, January 3rd, 2009, is when this happened, which I believe was also the same day that the banks got bailed out. So there's some poetry right there. And some people also consider the birth of Bitcoin to be the year previous to that, so 2008, on Halloween, October 31st, because that's when the white paper was published. And essentially that's the conception of it, but it wasn't birthed until birthed until January 3rd, is my opinion. Another little detail is where the meteor lands, there's a crater, and if you notice the lines on the road begin at that point, and so that's supposed to represent the beginning of the blockchain and the ledger, and all the cities in town popping up around it is representative of the ledger and the industries that are building around it. And what's kind of cool about the Genesis block is, since everything's public, you can actually look at the first block that was mined on a block explorer of sorts. And you can see the address, you can see the transactions, and none of the transactions have gone out of that wallet and out of that address. And what is kind of cool is people will sometimes donate to that address because it's almost like a wishing well. It's almost like a digital artifact or digital shrine to Satoshi and the Bitcoin philosophy. So going back to the banks getting hit, the reason why I showed this is because it's shocking, and it is also supposed to represent that Bitcoin in general, or the main concepts behind it, are hurting the banks the most, because they're the ones that have had the monopoly on value. And I think when people start learning more about Bitcoin, they also learn more about the financial systems which they're forced to operate within, and Bitcoin has become the first possible other option to go to. Another theme in this video is our vehicles, and you'll see the horse carriage at the start, and once the meteor hits, it disappears, and then cars start going by. And this is just supposed to represent the evolution of technology. Technology evolves, and so does money. Money has changed many times over human civilization, so maybe this is just the next step. Here we have the white rabbit, of course. That doesn't really need to be explained, other than like Alice in Wonderland, you're going down this rabbit hole, and the more you learn, the more you want to go deeper. And it's very accurate, because if you listen to any podcasts or anyone who first got into Bitcoin, they usually say that term, because that's what it feels like. It really does feel like you're learning so much, and you realize how much of a paradigm shift it all really is. These pizza pals over here is a shout out to the famous Bitcoin pizza story, when a guy in 2010 spent $30 in Bitcoin, which in contemporary prices would be millions, which would make me go crazy, I think. But and to make things worse too, is Papa John's pizza.
Welcome to Papa's house.
It's definitely not worth millions. There's a wall with cypherpunks written on it, and that's a shout out to the history to Bitcoin and digital cash and all these philosophies that were the stems. It was something that started in the 70s, and it was focusing on the use of technology to advance social libertarian kind of viewpoints. And they had a famous email list, which were the founders of they believed to be Bitcoin were someone involved in this email list. It's very interesting, and I'm still learning more about this, so I would actually love to know more about it. So I should have probably done it before doing this video. But I think having the idea of having the mysterious founder, I think that makes perfect sense, because you're going up against, you know, the big leagues when you're trying to redesign a financial system. So I don't blame them for not disclosing their identity. In the background here, you see Mount Gox, and Mount Gox was probably one of the first big quote unquote hacks that the news media covered, to kind of make Bitcoin seem like a risky thing to invest in. In 2011, hackers stole millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and that scared a lot of people away from learning anything more other than it was some sort of scam. But in reality, Bitcoin was still the code of Bitcoin was still solid. It was the infrastructure around the trading, that made it unsafe. The blockchain sign turns on, and it starts off with currency, and then it kind of goes into real estate and democracy. And the thing that I want to show here was to make people think that blockchain just isn't Bitcoin, but blockchain is a good use case for a currency or for a store value or for financial assets, because it can be transparent and an open system that everyone can use. And I think other applications, like I use the term democracy, but the more correct term, I guess, would be governance, because it wouldn't necessarily be democratic, I guess. But what basically what I was trying to say was that there could be new political systems based on code. Real estate would also be an interesting asset to apply to the blockchain. That way you can have fractional ownership over a house, with multiple owners. So you could have 1% of an asset, 1% of a real estate asset through the blockchain. I think this will be an equalizing effect for people to use. It's an easier way for people to invest money without having millions or thousands of dollars to invest it. So if you only had $100 to spare, you could buy $100 of a blockchain real estate, and as the price goes up, the price of your holdings would also go up. So essentially, it's just an equalizer of opportunity. As the beat changes, the tulips will start growing, and this is just because countless times Bitcoin has been compared to the tulip mania. That was one of the biggest bubbles in history, and you'll see the news media bring it up all the time. But yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to have tulips in this world. There's a missing Satoshi sign. As I briefly mentioned before, Satoshi is the founder of Bitcoin, and I think it's smart to have an identity that's not public, just because you are up against the financial system. So I think it was smart to be anonymous. It's also kind of a fun, legendary way to start a movement. So here we have the miners. The miners are the ones that mine the Bitcoin, and they're also the ones that confirm the transactions to make sure everything's in check. So here we have a stork or a bird or whatever transferring a Bitcoin, and the miners are confirming it. And once it's confirmed, it gets received by that other little guy there. This is stored in a block, and the block holds multiple transactions, and the miners are take their fee. The signs in the back here, the CAPTCHA faucet and airdrop. The airdrop is the parachute one. This is a way that the network started off. This is the way that the Bitcoin network started off distributing, to have a more decentralized weighting. So back in the early days, people were just giving out Bitcoin for free. The CAPTCHA is a reference to the CAPTCHA codes. These, aka these faucets, where people would just sign up, and they would have like daily amounts or weekly amounts or whatever, and you just get you get a few satoshis, which is a small amount of Bitcoin. But like I remember I made a comment on a random YouTube video, posted my address, and said, "Hey, can someone give me some?" And they gave me like $25 worth. It was pretty cool, and it blew my mind. So everyone was just excited. Everyone was excited to use this and spread it, and it was a very supportive culture. The build sign in the back is a reference to the building of the ecosystem. So everyone's partaking and building it up. And the reason why it's misspelled is a reference to hodl or hodl, whatever, which was just a misspelt post back in the early days. I believe the media, they said hold on for dear life. Hold on for dear life, but that's actually inaccurate. It was a kind of funny story of some dude was drunk on a message board, and I remember something there being like his wife went to a lesbian bar or something like that, and he was drunk and he misspelled hold. It was hodl. It's just a weird little meme. The FOMO sign is fear of missing out. And we got this boomer looking fella in the front there. And one of the things that's interesting, and I've always been interested in this, is the use of technology and generations. So another theme that I actually have in this video is I was trying to show like school buses and kids on skateboards, because I think like intuitively kids understand technology better than the previous generations. That's the way it's always been, right? So having this old guy here just with his dog pooping is, just too bad for him. Get off zero is the idea of the risk management. At this point now, it's like Bitcoin has been proven to a certain extent, but the risk reward of just basically just not having zero. It's like everyone should just have a little bit in terms of the risk payoff, because even if you put $100 in, $20, it's like the odds of it going up are pretty high. At least that's what people think. And I think once you have a little skin in the game, you're much better off wanting to learn and to even use it or accept it. No coiners out of business, just sort of the same idea, where I think businesses that do accept Bitcoin will get an advantage, and that will strengthen their business, that will strengthen the ecosystem of Bitcoin. And I think I believe 50 Cent accepted Bitcoin for his album years before the big bull run in 2017, and so he made a lot of Bitcoin off that. And then I think he even backtracked. He was like, "Oh no, I didn't." So maybe he's being a little sneaky, but it's that type of opportunity where people will buy your music with it, and everyone wins. Here we have a little apple falling on this guy, which is referencing the Newton myth of gravity, where the apple fell on his head. Even though it's disputed that it actually happened, there's that, it's a good allegory overall, for that eureka moment. One thing about learning more about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is that you realize, like I realize how it looks like a cult from the outside, because it also looks like a cult from the inside. The amount of religious fervor that people have for it is very interesting. And in some senses, it does become a religion, because people want to convert and people want to split off and start their own chain of the cryptocurrency, and it does parallel religion, I think, in a lot of ways. It's a protocol religion. And one of the signs says God hates dags, which is a reference to the Westboro Baptist Church. And it's just playing off of the hatred for the other cryptos. But dags are very interesting. I think they may be important in the future, because it's a more fluid version of peer-to-peer. And basically it kind of takes the miners out of the situation, which is pretty cool, because I think the miners are somewhat problematic, and I think you could win a protocol with utility and like a cultural shift. I don't think you necessarily need an incentive, a financial incentive to run a network. Frictionless remittance is just a simple use case of global payments without having a middleman of sorts. Something like Western Union, where they'll charge a higher percentage just to make it from point A to point B, with having this trusted institution in between. But with crypto, you don't need that middleman anymore. Permissionless is pretty cool. It's a little bit crazier, because there's no authority, a central login account manager or anything like that. So you can just start an account anywhere at any time and be on your way. So it's like if you're starting a Google account, it's like you have to go through the signups, and with this permissionless way to do it, you have your keys and you have your wallet info. So it's a different way to think of a login, essentially. But the cons of that is, if you lose your keys, you're out of luck. Here we got the FUD barrier and the train. The train gets knocked over by the FUD. And FUD represents fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And if we scroll a little bit further ahead, we'll see that the media's filming the FUD. So it's kind of supposed to mean that they are perpetuating some element of FUD. And the banker also collects the coins that are distributed from that crash. And that's just kind of like a way of saying, I think they do have financial incentives to make Bitcoin seem like a bad thing, so that people get scared, sell it, and lowers the price, and then the cycle of FUD happens again. And we've seen this with individuals, we've seen it with countries. Like every time China says something's banned, the price usually goes down. People get scared, they sell, they say, no, I'm getting out, and then a few months later China will be like, yep, we're back on blockchain, and then the price will skyrocket. So I think they manipulate the markets in some aspect that way. The Bitcoin mine sign, there's roughly 18 million as of now, late 2019. There's roughly 18 million Bitcoin that have been mined out of 21 million. I I sometimes forget that people don't know that there's only 21 million, which creates the scarcity, which people are trying to leverage because they will assume that the demand will also go up as scarcity goes up. And a metaphor that's often used in this situation is musical chairs. So it's like at the start of musical chairs, everyone's laughing because you have a good chance of getting a chair, and then as soon as you're done to the last few rounds of musical chairs, it gets a lot more intense. The music stops and you have to run to your chair. So that's the theory, what will happen with Bitcoin. Also, 21 million, I think, is one of the easiest ideas to understand. And having a digital scarcity is really cool to me because back in the day, I played a bunch of MMOs, massive multiplayer online games like Asheron's Call, briefly EverQuest. I played a little bit of World of Warcraft, and one of the things that I thought what would be cool is if, like, I understood digital assets having value, and people would pay real money for digital assets, but now you can have a truly digital rare item with blockchain technology, and that's pretty sweet, in my opinion. I also made a bunch of merch based on that 21 million. Had a nice ring to it, so check it out on the link below. Looks pretty cool. And I also think it's a good first thing to talk about to people. There's only 21 million. It's a digital rarity, and it does have value as long as people give it value. There's a big Silk Road camel here. So Silk Road was the black market, which was reported a lot in the media. And this goes back to the FUD comment too, where that's all they would talk about was criminals using it. And they'd use it for drugs and weapons and all this bad stuff. But at the end of the day, criminals would actually prefer to use fiat cash, or even gold. Like you're not going to stop criminal activity by stopping Bitcoin. It's a poor argument in general, and that's why the media propels the FUD. But so the stable coin is supposed to be pinned to a dollar amount, and Tether apparently it prints money as the money comes in, so people can trade in a Tether token for $1 American. But there's some speculation that the coffers are actually empty and they don't have the amount that they say they have. So the stablecoin balloon, we have Tether, and the balloon is pushing up the Bitcoin balloon. So this is probably the most controversial part of my video and my viewpoint on Bitcoin, honestly. There's some dodginess to Tether and their lack of being audited for having backed assets per dollar. So I do think Tether, to a certain degree, is propping up the price. Going on record saying that, so we'll see about that. We have a little sign here with the sax player. just the different types of way a network is distributed. So we got decentralized, distributed, and centralized. And it's a quick little visual to help people think about the way that networks are operating and the pros and cons. There's pros and cons to each of them. Like centralized is essentially faster. That's the way that the internet kind of works now. Even though it is decentralized and it also is distributed, if like a lot of the web is hosted on Amazon servers, so if the Amazon servers went down, a big chunk of the internet would go down as well. So if there was a distributed or a decentralized network, the internet couldn't go down. And I think this is where the internet is going in regards to mesh nets and things like that. So instead of having an internet service provider, we will make an internet based on each other's computers and have almost like toll roads in which you have to pay cryptocurrency to access the internet. So streaming services will require a certain token for you to access the data. So it'd be like listening to Spotify, and you'd have to put in multiple coins every so often to get your service. You wouldn't have a subscription or anything like that. It would just be peer to peer. So we got a fork in the road, and this is splitting up the road essentially, and is splitting up the blockchain. And what this is all the you can take the code of Bitcoin, copy it, and create your own branch of that code. And there will be X amount of people that support you and go with that. And there's been many forks in Bitcoin's code. And this kind of goes back to the religious fervor that these protocols have, because I think some of them people do genuinely believe, but I think a lot of the times it's just a scam. It's the product is still legitimate, but it's essentially creating, you could potentially double your money if you get enough people to join your network. And there's been some speculation of like what Litecoin is. I think Litecoin does have a use case, but at the end of the day, it's just like changing a few lines of code on Bitcoin. So it doesn't really make any sense with these layer 2 solutions. We got multiple world currencies here. I was trying to spell out sexy using different dollars, pounds, euros, yens, and the sexy pointing to Bitcoin. It was just a little joke. It's global, but the other signs too are global. It's borderless. Like, it's, if you ever traveled and you have to change your currency, it's a very annoying process, and it can be quite difficult to travel when your local currency is crap, and you get a very poor exchange rate. It's just a very annoying process. So I think it does make sense to have some sort of global unit of value. Store of value is supposed to be a way to keep your wealth, and you can store your value in various ways, like through real estate. It's like you can grow wealth, you can store wealth, but if you keep your wealth in cash, then you're essentially losing your wealth because of inflation and other factors that do not necessarily store your wealth. And Bitcoin is at least a global solution for everyone in the world to put their wealth into this protocol to safely store what you've earned for your labor. Coda's law is a kind of a cool concept because you cannot break the law because the code is law. It's like if you compare it to the laws of the laws of the land, it's like do not steal. It's like you can steal because you can just pick something up and take it, but with a code, with a protocol, you can't print more money because you just can't. It's like there's no way to print more Bitcoin. Actually, that's not true. There could be consensus, I guess, in the community, but I think that would be very unpopular. Bank the unbankable. That kind of goes back to permissionless. There should be a way for people to have transactional experiences with the bank without having a bank account, and that's what banking the unbankable does. There's a story that's quite popular where in Nigeria they had some sort of bank account system on cell phones, and they would pay each other through cell phones, and they kind of skipped an era of landlines or something like that, and it was just the way that they did things, and it made it much more easier for people to make a business or grow wealth and store wealth through these cell phones, and cryptocurrency is just like a better way to do that. This little graphic in the back is actually, I think, probably one of the more important ones. I wish I could have made it bigger. But layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. So on the left side we have our system, and on the right side we have the Bitcoin system. So it's like we have the gold nugget, we have a gold coin, then we have a banknote, which used to represent gold, and then we have a fiat note, which is based on nothing. And with Bitcoin, we have the settlement layer of which is you can do directly to one another. Then you have a side chain, you have a lightning network, and you have a debit card, and all these are all essentially layers on top of Bitcoin, which makes making a cash a transaction that can be settled on the Bitcoin network. I kind of poorly explained it, but these are all very complex things. But look up layers and settlement layers. Look in the links. I'll have a bunch of links in the bottom of this. So pump and dump and shitcoin, those are just terms that people use for the scams that are the scams do exist. And it was just back in the I don't think we'll ever go back to a 2017 level of madness, but there were some crazy amounts of scams that people made money, and it was just crazy. It was really insane. We got a hacker here under the pump and dump. This guy is actually stealing like a USB of some sort of crypto while the other guy sleeps, which I thought was just a little funny. Impossible to counterfeit. If I was, say, on Craigslist, I was selling, I don't know, like a TV for $50, there's a potential that the $50 I get from the person on Craigslist is fake. But with Bitcoin, there's no way to fake it. Otherwise, it won't send, it won't scan, like it won't work. So it is impossible to counterfeit, and I find that an appealing characteristic. Unstoppable, uncensorable money. That is more useful, I think, in the places in the world where there is turmoil. So something like Venezuela, their money got sent to the ground, where people were, instead of buying toilet paper, they were using their dollar bills, not dollar bills, but they were using their fiat currency to use as toilet paper, which is just insane. And once something like that happens, I think a lot of people do flock to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies because it's a system that won't be stopped. It's a system that can't be stopped. So this is supposed to be all Bitcoin, building up forks of Bitcoin, the ecosystem of Bitcoin, and then the other ecosystem that's separate is Ether. Was the second runner up, and it appeared. There's a crypto kitty in the back, smart contracts. It's just the rise of the cryptomania. This goes back to the forked code. You'll see a registered trademark. This little guy is supposed to be a representative of a corporate coin, which I think will become more and more prominent as people start to understand and feel more comfortable with like Libra coin or whatever with Facebook. I think it's very scary, but it's also very cool because I think that will bring more people into Bitcoin. A lot of people say that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin stuff is the start of Web 3.0. It's a digital frontier, so we just got this cowboy looking guy here. There's not much depth to this one, just a cool character. Not your keys, not your crypto is one of the phrases I think that was coined, no pun intended, by Antop. He is one of the first voices that I started to learn from, but I think it's a simple phrase: not your keys, not your crypto.
Your keys, not your crypto.
So when you put your Bitcoin on an exchange, a lot of the times they actually have ownership over it at that point, because you'll have to go through them to leave their exchange, and that kind of is antithetical to some of the philosophy of Bitcoin, which is ownership and self control. I'm not completely against it, honestly, but until there's some more reputable exchanges out there, I can understand why people wouldn't want this to happen, because otherwise you get something like Mt. Gox. So you put your Bitcoin on Mt. Gox, you don't actually own it because they're the ones that have it until you get off the exchange. So it's something good to keep in mind. And I actually have a custodian, a janitor type character, and that's supposed to be reflective of that too. Just the custodial services kind of starts replacing roles of the bank, and new problems start popping up. Magic internet money was a meme that was posted on Reddit, and I feel like it brought in a lot of people, such as myself. I started to get interested in that era. So there's actually at this part in the video, there's a hallucination of sorts, and this is actually supposed to be represented in the hash rate character, because that's one of the terms used for the security of Bitcoin. And I'm just playing off like a hash pipe type of thing. So this character, he's got those little smoke lines coming out, and as he takes a hash rate hit, and then the wizard actually starts glowing with the same effect. And I was trying to show, maybe it wasn't too clear, but I was trying to show that it was a hallucination of this bull run that happens right after. And we start going to we start going to the moon at that point, because he's hitting that hash rate. And the phrase "going to the moon" is a term used for Bitcoin holders or crypto holders who have quote unquote made it. They've gone to the moon. They've beat the market. The green candles are a sign of the market buying. Layer 2 is also on the side of the train, which is I think it'll cause, once we have like a good layer 2, I think people will start using it more, and like fees reduced and stuff like that. That's what's holding Bitcoin back from being a cash. So the wizard goes to the moon, and there's all these other cryptocurrencies up there too. There's some memes in the background. We got the BitConnect guy in the back. We have some other technical analysis charts. We got Doge, which was the first meme coin, and then it starts to actually gain value. It's actually a fork of Bitcoin, so it's the same code of Bitcoin, just with changed parameters. There's a bunch of them. There's like a trillion or something. We got the Bart Simpson technical analysis, which is hilarious. It's great. We got the whales. There's whales also shooting up, because the whales are, I think personally, the whales should be saved. No, the whales are a term used for people with deep pockets, rich people who invest and they change the market. There's an interesting theory saying like people are going to be waiting for countries to accept Bitcoin and countries to make an official statement, but it's going to be the whales, the private investors, that I think are going to move the market more. I mean, countries will definitely hop on, I think, but it's going to be the individual whales that push the market. There's also a buy flag, which is another technical analysis. When the market moves up and down, is tested and bounces off of high points and low points, it's an indication to buy that asset. I threw in a UFO, there's no reason for that UFO. I just needed to kill some time. So the other cryptocurrencies dissolve. I think, like I said before, I don't think this altcoin stuff will keep happening. I think maybe there'll be like 6 to 10 main cryptocurrencies, with like a mixture of countries crypto and decentralized crypto and also corporate crypto. That's my prediction, at least. So the banker who keeps popping up in this video, he's not Satoshi. He's just the one that got hit at the beginning. Not supposed to be anyone in particular. So he ends up buying all. The narrative is that he buys all the cryptocurrencies, begins fighting with the meme, the Bitcoin wizard. The network pushes the banker away in all these nodes and stuff. And I'm just trying to show, like, at this point, I'm just trying to show that even though the Bitcoin wizard is a silly meme, it actually is a threat, I think, to the banker, and it represents something that's actually quite political. So the banker gets pissed off and starts using some of his own magical devices, and he creates a block, which is supposed to be like a blockchain. And remember, this is all supposed to be a hallucination, right? So this is why it gets weird. A blockchain appears, encapsulates the wizard, and spins around a little bit and gets sent back, wailing down to the earth, the ecosystem, and crashes the market, essentially. And what I'm trying to say there is that, like, it's, it is an unregulated market. I think, like I was saying before about the whales, I think you can manipulate aspects of the market by buying up and crashing it and taking advantage of certain market movements. And yeah, it's just part of it. But essentially, once it crashes, it will recover, it will rebuild, it will bounce back. And that's why hodling is good, because then you can just kind of stay off this chaos. Another part too with the blockchains type of spell is because I have heard interesting arguments that blockchain is actually flawed, or not flawed, it's just old, right? And but it works. And there's a part of me where I'm like, I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist like some people, but I am pro Bitcoin. But maybe the technology does, like maybe the DAG technology is the one that we're thinking of. Maybe that is the superior technology, because there are some interesting limitations of Bitcoin, like scalability and speed, and the miners are kind of somewhat problematic. I don't know. So we crash, we get a crater, and we start bouncing back, and the ecosystem's rebuilding, everything's good, and they're just rebuilding. It's so we got some other cool ideas. The trust machine, which is based on it's a term that people use for having this protocol that allows peer-to-peer interactions without any risk. Fractional ownership, which I discussed earlier, and having small amounts of ownership, fractional ownership to be specific, on something like real estate. So you could own 1% of a house versus having a complicated paperwork of owning 1% of a house. It's estimated that the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2140. And if quantum computers become a thing, that may break Bitcoin, but I don't know, maybe it would also help Bitcoin, because if I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe if you can break it with quantum, maybe you can protect it with quantum, right? Protocol Wars is a reference to Star Wars, obviously, and goes back to what I was saying about, I don't know if blockchain's the one, but we'll see. Still not dead. This is the amount of times that it's been called dead, and since I've followed it for so long, this idea that these talking heads on the news saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's this, Bitcoin's definitely dead. It's blah 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 illegal." It's happened so many times that now you just laugh, and it's actually quite entertaining to see. Right and left. I think this is actually an important slide, because we seem to be very divided in our societies with the way we approach each other, and the way that the way that the internet has kind of made us feel divided. And I think there is this common ground of Bitcoin where you got the hippie, and you got the mega cap red cap dude there. And I think both of the political parties or political spectrum, everyone on the political spectrum, up, down, left, right, can agree that Bitcoin is an interesting way to view finance. Everyone wants a whole Bitcoin, and a few $1,000 is a lot of money. So when people, I think not being able to have one whole Bitcoin turns a lot of people away, because who wants, nobody wants 0.0001 Bitcoin. They want a whole Bitcoin. So there are some arguments that people want to change the unit of measurement of Bitcoin. So the smallest amount you can have is 1 Satoshi, which is 8 decimal places of a Bitcoin. So instead of having 0.1 Bitcoin, you would have 10 million Satoshis, and I think that might be a better way for people to wrap their head around. The halving happens every 4 years, and this means that the miner reward will be cut in half. So the next halving in 2020 is expected to increase a market demand of Bitcoin. So they are expecting the market cycle to start a bull run in May of 2020. So keep that in mind. Peer-to-peer, direct transactions online without having the middleman. So we have the fiat ramp in the background, and that's a term used for onboarding and offboarding the current state of getting your local currency to the cryptocurrency. And right now it's still pretty clunky, but it'll get better. We have those little side chain graphics, which represents transactions that are off of the main chain but are still running in parallel with the main chain. You gotta have the Lambo. Lambos are part of the meme culture of making it and going to the moon, so to speak. And that sax player from earlier made it. He's just loving life with a guitar. Actually, I just realized I thought I put the saxophone player in there too. Darn, I should have had all them on the Lambo. Also, if you notice, the Lambo is white and it has a rabbit tail. It's what happens if you go down the rabbit hole with its little rabbit ears. And in the back, we got the train on the rail, and it takes off and zips away. So what is the future of Bitcoin? Who knows? What I do know is that it is interesting. I do think people should learn more about it. Check out the resources I have in the description link below. I tried my best to explain it in a fun and entertaining way. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.